Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is the Question Guy podcast. I'm here with Allie Stone, and she's got a very passionate, very personal story today that she's going to share with us because she lost her purpose in a very in a very different way than most of us actually experience. So, Allie, if you can share that conversation with us today, I think our audience would greatly appreciate it. Let's dive in.
Sure, sounds good. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. The conversations I've had with you have already gone deep, and I've really appreciated just chatting and getting to meet you, Keith. And I love what you're doing. Yeah, it's interesting in our life because I think we're all kind of on this journey to connect with why we're here, what our purpose is, what our meaning is, right? In this life.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that I was one of those people that was really lucky. I had that. I had this beautiful career. I was super connected. It was a beautiful experience. I was building amazing things. And so for 17 years, I was a partner and one of the directors of the original Joe's organization in Northern Alberta. We have 12 units. So it's a pretty big organization. We had on average around 350 team members and did around 35 million a year in annual revenue turnover. So it's a big business. There's a lot going on inside of it. And if anybody listening is in hospitality, you know, restaurants are just kind of crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on all the time, but I fell in love with it. I loved it. And I was in my space, in my sweet spot. And it was a really beautiful experience for me up until 2018. And so in 2018, so my husband and I were part of this partnership in the restaurants together and partners obviously in life. And he's a competitive marathon runner. So we'd spent a lot of our life traveling around the world so he could run these marathons and running at a really highly competitive level. So this is like a different life for me because I don't do that, but it was really cool to get to be a support. And so what he had decided was that he wanted to run all 7 of the world major marathons, which was going to take us like Berlin, Japan, Boston, all of these amazing places. And so in February of 2018, we found ourselves in Tokyo, Japan, so that he could run. Sorry, let me just turn this off for you. I apologize. That was quick. So that he could run the Tokyo Marathon. And this was a really big deal. He spent the better part of a year training for this event.
Just for this one event?
Just for this one event.
Oh my goodness.
And so when you're at this level, this competitive level, you spend a lot of time training. I've witnessed him sacrifice a lot of things in his life to achieve this level of greatness. And I think you probably see this in your guests, right? You know, people who are successful or who go through adversity to become successful, there are sacrifices involved for sure. Mm-hmm. And there were for my husband. And so, yeah, this marathon, it was really interesting because when we got to Japan, I knew something was wrong with my husband, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was like one of those really strange moments where I was having moments with him where he would maybe repeat a statement or say something twice or say a word twice, just like really strange kind of neurological things, but not having any indication or understanding that something was wrong. I was just kind of like, you know, when you have those spidey senses come up and that stuff was happening to me. And so I tried to talk to him a little bit about it. And he really just felt like nothing was wrong. He was like, it's probably just
So he couldn't
nerves.
tell or feel anything different.
He couldn't feel anything. And so that was really unnerving for me, right? Because you're kind of witnessing this. I don't know if you've ever been in a position like that where you're like witnessing something with somebody you love or you care about and something's changing, but they don't see it. It's a really tough conversation.
Yeah.
And so I tried to let it go. I tried to be like, okay, Allie, you're probably just making this. I don't really know, right? What's going on? He feels there's nothing wrong. I don't want to press the issue. But then as time went on, it just kind of got worse and worse. And so he ran the marathon.
Before you go any further, did anybody else kind of notice something different or just?
Well, we were there alone,
okay.
Right? So we were in Tokyo. And so it was kind of tough because I didn't speak the language and I found myself in a place where like, yeah, it was hard to connect. And even I called back home to my sister because I was like, I just need to talk to somebody about this. And when I kind of told her what was going on, she was like, you should definitely be concerned. And the next morning, Chris was running the marathon. So at that point, there was really no stopping.
Right.
the train of events that was about to happen. And so when he woke up in the morning, he went to go run the marathon, and he ran it. He ran it in 2 hours and 30, I want to say 2 hours and 32 minutes, I think. So highly, highly competitive marathon time. And he was fine after the marathon, totally fine. Came back. I was like, okay, maybe I just made this stuff up. Maybe he was just tired from the flight. Maybe, right? All of these things. And then it was at dinner that night. We went out to celebrate, and we were sitting in a restaurant, and he went to the washroom, and he didn't come back for like 25 minutes. And I was kind of looking around and being like, my husband leave me in Japan?
I don't think
And
so.
then I was like, I hope not. And then I saw him come around the corner with a server pointing, and the server was pointing him back towards me. And he came and sat down, and he said, that was so strange. I got so lost trying to find the washroom and get back here. And I was kind of looking around the restaurant. It wasn't a big restaurant. And I was like, oh, and that's the moment where I was like, no, something is really wrong here. And so Chris and I were kind of recounting the marathon, and I was talking about the day and how the event went for him. And he was like, it was so good. Like, I can't believe how amazing that marathon was. But the problem was that I didn't see you on the race route. And I was like, I saw you 3 times. And I actually had
Like,
pictures of
made eye
him.
contact? Really?
Yeah. And because he was so elite, he wasn't really running in a crowd. I have pictures of him waving at me and all of these things, and he didn't remember any of it.
Okay.
And so at that point I said, like, we better go home. Like, you're obviously really tired. Let's get some rest. And at that point I wanted to like get in touch with some people back home and kind of get some advice on what to do, because I knew he didn't see what was going on. And so that night he fell into a coma. And by the time I got him to a hospital, he was awake. But neurologically, he had changed forever. And so, to make kind of a long medical story short, he's basically suffered what they call some type of brain injury. It's never fully been diagnosed, through what they think was a virus he contracted in Japan.
Mm.
And the resulting effect is that he has no short-term memory. And so it's kind of like having, a 43-year-old husband with, Alzheimer's type symptoms. And so it's pretty intense. And so, kind of back to our career and our story, we were doing original shows together, right? So coming back from Japan, my husband's now suffering from this illness. And I come home, and, our organization had expected us to be gone for 14 days. 14 days turned into 2 months very quickly, in the blink of an eye. He was just like in the acute phase of being ill at that time. And I got to a place where I was like, I have to get back to work. Like, I have to get back to this organization. And they were doing great. Like, I was really lucky because we had worked really hard to create an amazing culture. But you just know it, right? You can't not have the leaders of the organization in there for that long of a period of time, especially without pre-plans. So I started to really feel this pull to get back to work. But I was really torn between taking care of my husband and getting back to work, and what it was going to look like in the organization without him, because we were basically like thinking partners in everything we did. And when I went back, it was obvious to me. I was not connected. I didn't feel it. I didn't know how to be there. I'd lost my drive and my passion, and all that oomph that was there, 2 months before, was just like burning so low for me. And honestly, Keith, it was probably one of the most challenging times in my life, because I didn't know how to show up.
Yeah.
350 people. It was really
Well,
important for
you're
me to
still
show up
with
for.
your husband emotionally, psychologically, you're still with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what do you do, right? Like, for anybody who's listening to this, I don't really know the answer. What do you do in a situation like that? Because there's this reality of the world and life where you have to kind of get back to your business. But then there's also this new reality where you want to be with the person you love and take care of them and try to figure out what's going on. But then the reality of the world is that can't go on forever, right? We will run out of money. We won't have a house. We'll have to start selling things. All of these thoughts are going through my mind. So I'm starting to almost panic about this. And so I go back to work, because I feel like it's what I have to do.
Okay.
And what I want to say is, anytime in my life when I felt like this is what I have to do, things haven't gone as well as I would have hoped. You might have that reflection too. I'm not sure. But when we do the things we want to do, we're so much more fulfilled, right? But I knew I loved Joe's. I loved the people. I loved the connection. We had this incredible initiative where we were making all of this social impact with the organization. And it was just so incredibly beautiful. And I went back and I just couldn't engage. And so it actually didn't take me long. It only took me about 2 weeks, and I had a complete mental breakdown. And what happened was I showed up to work one day and I was going to lead the senior level leadership team meeting that I was now leading alone in Chris's absence. And I remember driving in that day thinking, God, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know how to show up without him. I don't know how to not have somebody with me, because somebody had been beside me the whole time. And I wasn't alone in the organization, but I felt so alone in that time. And I pulled up to work that day and I put my hand on the door of my car and I went to get out and I froze. And I just like couldn't get out of my car. And yeah, it like actually makes me emotional to think about it, because nothing like that has ever happened to me, and nothing really has ever happened to me like that since. But my body had a visceral reaction to everything I had been just trying to like push through all that time since that trauma in
Yeah.
Japan, right?
Yeah.
And so I called into one of my coworkers and I said, hey, I just need somebody to talk to for a minute. And at this point, I'm sobbing, I'm crying in my car, and I'm thinking, I don't know how I can do this. And I'm like, maybe he'll just come out and give me a pep talk, tap me on the back, get me back to work.
Could you
I can
even
go
open
run
the
this meeting.
door, like to your car?
Yeah, I had him come outside and he just kind of like kneeled beside my door. I will never forget this moment, because sometimes the kindness and compassion of other human beings changes your life. And this guy changed my life in this moment, 100%.
Okay.
And so he just kneeled there. He just let me cry. And he just kind of like put his hand on my knee and he was like, just feel it. And then he said, what's going on? And I said, I just don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do this. And he said, which blew my mind, he said, that's okay. And it was really a pivotal moment in my life for me, because I had not thought for one moment that it might be okay that I wasn't okay. That how could I not be okay? My husband just lost like his entire life. He couldn't even work. He had no memory. He like all of these things. What right did I have to not be okay? But now sitting here at this point in my life, I know I had every right to not be okay, but I didn't know how to process that.
Yeah.
And so he allowed me to feel that day. And yeah, like I said, it changed my life. And so I didn't go to work. He took over the meeting for me, which was, yeah, right. When you have people like that on your team, you're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. And, it wasn't something he did normally. Like, it wasn't something he was trained to do. He just did it for me. And I didn't go back to work for another 2 months. I left and I started to head home. And then I realized home wasn't where I needed to be either, because I was being called to do a lot there. And so I actually went to my sister's and I just cried, had a breakdown. I slept on her couch. And when I woke up, I remember sitting there and, when you're kind of in that recovery phase of a breakdown and you're just kind of like really emotionally exhausted and you're just trying to process everything that happened. And I remember I was sitting on the couch and I said, like, what am I going to do? Right? Some things have to change, because if I don't figure out how to make some changes, I'm not going to make it through this.
Right.
Not a thing. Right. So I just started thinking, what makes me feel better? What brings joy to my life? What are the things that I haven't been able to do since all of this happened? And can I start to bring some of these things back? And sent me on an incredible journey that completely changed my life. I started diving into meditation. I became a heart math resilience mentor. I did all of these things initially for myself. I had no intention to share them with other people. But the results I was able to garner within myself and my own nervous system and the way I was showing up, people started asking. And they started being like, hey, what's up? Why are you so calm? How come, how come you're able to show up so well now? And so I started sharing and teaching these things. And it just completely brought back my purpose in work. And so I started coaching with these things. I started sharing them with other leaders. I started seeing the benefits that they could have in their life and their health. And it just reconnected me to what I was doing, which was so incredibly important because I actually was sad. Like I was grieving the loss of the life that I had before with Original Joe's and with my husband. And so finding, refinding some purpose and some connection was so incredibly pivotal. It was so important, such an important moment.
Well, I just want to say yes, because each of us, as being human, we're never taught how to grieve. And so I'm connected now more than ever with people who call themselves and facilitate coaching, grief coaching. And so for you to be able to do that is a blessing because that released so much energy within your body that allowed your mind and your spirit to reconnect. Second, good for you that you're able to re-identify and refine now a purpose that is even more powerful than I think than you were before. Because it's good to run a business and you felt purpose in that, but now you are touching lives in a very different, powerful way. And that's a purpose you can't take away.
Yeah.
I want to come back to bring you back on Coach's Corner to talk about more of the business aspect of that. But before we end this conversation, talk to us about what it meant for you to find that purpose again, to be re-engaged in life again. I think people need to hear that.
Yeah. It was everything. I think it's not that we're not going to become lost or have hard times in our lives because we are. It's part of the human condition. It's part of the experience, right? I think we're meant to go through the ebbs and flows of life. But when we do the work to reconnect and believe that it's possible for ourselves, it's everything because you've now been through the muck, you've now been through the journey, you've been through the darkness, and now you see the light on the other side. And I always say that light, every time you go through a tunnel or a corridor, the light is even brighter every time we evolve and we work through the things that we go through in our life. So yeah, it's everything. And so if somebody's listening today and they're feeling like they've lost their purpose or their connection to their life or their work or whatever that is in their life, I just want to say that it is possible, but it's only possible with awareness, intention, and action. And we make those choices in our lives. And they're not always easy choices to make, but they
So
help.
with the limited amount of time that we have left, leave our audience with one of those three
Sure.
and then expand upon it. I'll give you 30 seconds. Make somebody's life revaluable today.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I mean, it starts with awareness, so I'll start there.
Okay.
It's all about the internal reflection, the introspection. Don't be afraid to ask yourself the hard questions. Often, as leaders, we're totally fine asking other people the hard questions. Ask yourself the hard questions because all that does is connect your mind and your heart, and it allows your what's true and authentic to you to speak to you so you can figure out how to move forward. So that would be what I would say is don't be afraid to do that.
I think that's beautiful. And it's the perfect way to end this conversation. Allie Stone, thank you so much for joining me on another edition of the Question Guy podcast. For those who are watching and listening, I'll see you next time. And for my audience, she's coming back. She's going to come back and talk about what this means now for her professionally on Coach's Corner. Catch us next time. Take care.